Moving on, international efforts remain underway to free hostages in Gaza and prevent a wider regional conflict, while countries also pledge humanitarian support for civilians. But Israel continues to intensify its airstrikes on Gaza ahead of what its spokesperson described as the next stage of the war. Shin Ha-young has the latest.
Israel and Hamas engaged in limited clashes in Gaza on Sunday. An Israeli soldier was killed by an anti-tank missile during a raid into the city aimed at clearing the area and gathering intelligence about hostages held by Hamas.
During one of the raids, an Israeli Defense Forces soldier was killed, and 3 soldiers were wounded. Their families have been notified.
This came after the Israeli military announced that it would strengthen its airstrikes on Gaza ahead of what its spokesperson described as the next stage of the war. Israel ramped up its bombing of targets on 3 fronts, including airstrikes on the West Bank. Meanwhile, a day after 20 trucks carried medical aid, food, and water into Gaza on Saturday, another 17 trucks moved through the Rafah crossing with more humanitarian aid. For the second straight day, aid was allowed into the Palestinian enclave during a short window as Israel continued preparations for a ground offensive. Amid growing fears that the fighting between Israel and Hamas could escalate into a wider geopolitical conflict, CNN reports that the Biden administration has pressed Israel to delay its ground invasion of Gaza for the release of more hostages held by Hamas and to allow more humanitarian aid to reach the area. U.S. President Joe Biden, in a virtual meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday, welcomed the entry of the first aid convoys into the Gaza Strip. The White House said both leaders affirmed their commitment to the ongoing humanitarian aid for Gaza and celebrated the release of 2 American hostages by Hamas. It also called for the immediate release of all remaining hostages. President Biden also held a virtual meeting with leaders from Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom to discuss the Israel-Hamas conflict, which has the potential to escalate to other parts of the Middle East, with clashes already happening on the Israel-Lebanon border. The White House stated that President Biden discussed his recent visit to Israel and efforts to ensure food, medicine, and other humanitarian support for residents of Gaza. Western leaders pledged to work together closely for lasting peace in the Middle East and to provide support to their citizens in the region, particularly those who wish to leave Gaza. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.